The wind came in low moans that slid between the steel walls and rattled the loose plating like distant drums. Sergeant Elias Ward listened to it as he worked, feeding an ammunition belt into the wide, dark mouth of the Gatling gun. Each metallic clink echoed across the empty plain. The weapon sat at the heart of Outpost Karsk. 9. Anchored to a rusted swivel mount scavenged from a mining rig. Its 6 barrels caught the faint light of the frozen horizon, turning it dull silver, almost beautiful. Around him, snow drifted through the cracks in the roof and hissed where it met the warm air of the generator. The cold was a living thing here, patient, constant, indifferent. Ward had spent most of his adult life in places like this, posted to forgotten edges of human space where the maps bled into white and the air burned your lungs. He liked the quiet. He liked knowing that everything that kept him alive could fit inside a single bunker. But the quiet never lasted, not when the galaxy kept expanding and every new frontier drew someone powerful enough to claim it. Private Hessa stumbled in from the comms tower, stamping the frost off his boots. He was younger than Ward by 2 decades, all nerves and quick words. "Still nothing from Central," he said. "The storm's choking half the channels. If anyone's out there, we're not hearing them." Ward kept his eyes on the gun. "Then we assume no one's coming." Hessa hesitated. "Sir, the last transmission said 3 colonies went dark. You think it's raiders again?" "No," Ward said. He tightened the feed belt. "Raids don't leave whole systems silent." From the far side of the compound came the sound of boots crunching on ice. Lieutenant Mara Ivers crossed the yard, her silhouette sharp against the gray light. She moved with a quiet precision that made people straighten when she passed. "Perimeter sensors are back online," she said, voice muffled by her mask. "I had to reroute half the grid through the mining batteries, but we got eyes for now." "Good," Ward said. "Let's hope we see trouble before it sees us." Mara's gaze drifted to the Gatling gun. "Still working on that relic?" "It's not a relic," Ward replied without looking up. "It's reliable. Everything else we have depends on circuitry that freezes when the wind picks up." She folded her arms. "You really think a museum piece is going to make a difference when whatever wiped out 3 colonies gets here?" "It made a difference before," he said. "Different war, same lesson." Hessa shifted awkwardly. "You ever actually fire that thing, Sarge?" Ward gave a faint grin. "Once. Didn't need it twice." The generator hummed behind them, steady and comforting. The smell of oil filled the air. For a moment, the outpost almost felt safe. Then a sharp tone cut through the static on Hessa's radio. He fumbled with the receiver. "Incoming transmission, multiple signals, high orbit." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Can you trace them?" "Trying, wait." "It's not human." The 3 of them stared at the speaker as a voice filled the air, cold, precise, almost musical. "Unregistered human facility detected. You occupy resource territory belonging to the Zerath Dominion. Immediate surrender required. Failure to comply will result in correction." Mara swore under her breath. "Zerath, of course." Ward leaned against the gun, jaw tightening. "Cut transmission." Hessa hesitated. "Sir, cut it," Ward repeated. "They're not here to talk." The radio clicked off, but the silence it left felt heavier than the wind. Everyone in the outer colonies had heard the stories. The Zerath sweeping through fringe worlds, dismantling settlements, collecting survivors for study. They didn't conquer, they erased. Mara's tone was low but steady. "How long do you think we have?" Ward looked toward the horizon, where the clouds were darkening into a single, wide shadow. "Not long." Within the hour, the first shapes appeared, sleek craft descending through the snow like black spears. They landed beyond the ridge, kicking up pillars of white dust. The ground trembled. Through the magnifier, Ward saw movement. Metallic soldiers fanning out, their armor reflecting the light like liquid mirrors. No visible faces, no banners, no hesitation. Hessa swallowed hard. "There must be hundreds. Probably more," Ward said. He turned to Mara. "Get everyone to stations. If we can't run, we fight." The outpost came alive. Men and women scrambled to their posts, hands shaking as they loaded rifles and checked the mines buried under the snow. Ward stood by the Gatling gun, watching the aliens advance in perfect formation. He could feel their confidence even from this distance, an army that had never known defeat. The first volley came without warning. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, striking the outer wall with searing light. Metal screamed and split apart. One of the watchtowers erupted in flame. Hessa ducked, covering his head as debris rained down. "They're not even trying to talk this time." "They never do," Ward said. He spun the gun's mount toward the ridge, testing its motion. The weapon moved with a grinding hum, old but eager. Mara crouched beside him. "Even if it works, you'll never cut through those shields. Not if I shoot like they expect me to." He adjusted the angle slightly, aiming lower, where the snow churned under the alien's march. The gun's barrels began to turn, whining softly as they gathered speed. The weapon shook with life, a deep vibration that traveled up his arms and into his chest. He could feel the heartbeat of the machine, steady and certain. "Open the gate," he ordered. The outer barricade slid aside, revealing the open field between them and the ridge. The aliens reacted instantly, redirecting fire toward the gap. Ward waited until the last possible second. Then he pulled the trigger. The Gatling gun roared to life. Fire and thunder filled the air. The recoil drove him back a step, but he held firm, the belt of ammunition feeding through in a blur of brass. The stream of tungsten slugs ripped through the snow, kicking up clouds of vapor. The front ranks of Zerath soldiers stumbled, their shields flaring blue under the impact. Then the shields cracked, shattered, and bodies began to fall. Mara shouted over the noise, disbelief in her voice. "It's working!" Ward didn't answer. He focused on the rhythm, the spin, the recoil, the smell of hot metal. The aliens tried to reform, but the gun tore through them faster than they could adapt. When the barrels finally began to slow, the field was littered with smoking armor and shards of ice. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. Ward released the trigger, smoke curling from the gun's vents. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the echo of adrenaline. Hessa peeked over the barricade, wide-eyed. "They're retreating. They're actually pulling back." Mara exhaled, lowering her rifle. "What did we just do?" Ward looked across the field at the bodies glinting under the pale light. "We reminded them that fear isn't exclusive to humans." The horizon was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the enemy would be watching, recalculating. Ward could almost feel the weight of their gaze pressing through the snow and metal, studying him, studying the weapon. They would return. They always did. He laid a gloved hand on the Gatling gun's smoking frame. "Old Faithful," he whispered, almost to himself. "Looks like you still have something to say." The wind carried his words away into the vast, cold silence. Above, the clouds began to move again, dark shapes shifting against the gray sky, like something gathering strength. Ward turned his eyes upward, jaw set, as the faint hum of distant engines began to build in the air. They were coming back, and this time he intended to make the entire galaxy listen. Snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the field where metal and blood had frozen together. The smell of ozone lingered, sharp and bitter, rising from the wreckage of the first battle. Sergeant Elias Ward stood beside the Gatling gun, its barrels cooled to a dull gray, smoke curling faintly from its vents. The silence after the chaos was almost cruel. Around him, his men moved like sleepwalkers through the drifts, scavenging ammunition, collecting the dead, whispering to keep their hands from shaking. Every face carried the same stunned realization. They had survived. Mara Ivers approached, her hood pulled tight against the wind. The firelight from a makeshift brazier carved shadows across her cheeks. "Command still isn't responding," she said quietly. "The relay's fried. Whatever they hit us with scrambled every transmitter in 100 clicks." Ward's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Then we assume we're on our own. We've been on our own since the day they landed." He gave a faint grunt. The words didn't sting because they were true. Karsk 9 was never meant to hold against a galactic invasion. It was a fuel station on a frozen rock, garrisoned by colonists with more stubbornness than training. The Gatling gun was supposed to be a deterrent against pirates, not an army. Yet somehow, against every logic the galaxy believed in, it had torn through a Zerath battalion. Ward turned toward the field. The snow gleamed faintly blue under the alien lights still flickering from shattered armor. He had seen the Zerath before in footage, beautiful in a terrible, mechanical way. But lying broken in the frost, they looked fragile, their once perfect symmetry ruined by raw force. It wasn't victory he felt as he looked at them. It was the quiet, unsettling knowledge that they would come back. And next time, they'd bring the storm with them. Private Hesse limped up, arm in a sling. His face was pale, but his grin was stubbornly alive. "Sarge, you should have seen their faces. They didn't even know what hit him." Ward nodded. "Don't get too proud. They'll know next time." Hesse's grin faltered. "You think they'll hit us again?" "I think they'll hit us until there's nothing left to hit." Mara's gaze hardened. "Then we make them regret it." Ward looked at her. She meant it. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting for something, maybe for the right to exist in a universe that had already written them off. He wondered if that was humanity's curse or its genius, to keep picking fights with the impossible. By dawn, the storm had cleared, revealing a sky bruised purple and silver. Across the horizon, black specks began to descend, each trailing fire. Distant engines rumbled through the air, shaking the thin walls of the outpost. Hesse called out, "They're back. 10 ships this time, no 12. Ward grabbed his rifle and shouted, "Positions!" The men scattered, slipping into trenches and behind barricades. Mara took her place at the communication tower, jury-rigging a sensor to feed what little intel she could scrape together. The Gatling gun waited like a beast in slumber, its ammo belts coiled like snakes at Ward's feet. He ran his gloved hand over its iron casing. "All right, old girl," he murmured. Round 2. The first plasma strike hit a quarter-mile from the outpost, turning snow into a flash of molten glass. The shock wave flattened their perimeter sensors. Another bolt followed, then another, closer each time, until the ground trembled beneath them. The Zerath didn't speak this time. No demands, no warnings, just annihilation. The attack came in waves. Metallic soldiers dropped from orbit, unfolding their limbs and igniting energy shields. Flying drones hovered above, scanning with bright, cold eyes. Plasma beams slashed across the ridge, carving the defenses apart. The air stank of burning metal and ozone. Ward ducked behind the Gatling gun as a plasma bolt scorched the snow beside him. "Target their ground units." "Forget the flyers," he shouted. Mara's voice cut through the static. "We've lost the East Trench. They're pushing hard." Ward swung the barrels toward the advancing line. He could see them clearly now, rows of Zerath exosuits gleaming like liquid mercury, advancing with machine precision. Their armor shimmered with energy, reflecting the firelight in cruel hues. The human rifles barely scratched them. Ward waited. Patience was everything. He let them close the distance, step by deliberate step, until he could see the faint distortions where their shields overlapped. Then he fired. Old Faithful screamed back to life, its roar splitting the frozen air. The recoil hammered through his shoulders, but he held steady. The storm of tungsten tore into the alien formation, shredding shields and armor alike. The kinetic impact ripped through the air like thunderclaps. The front ranks fell, crumpled metal and black fluid staining the snow. "Keep feeding her," he yelled. 2 soldiers slammed a new belt into place, their hands raw from the cold. The barrels glowed orange, smoke curling up like incense from a mechanical altar. The aliens adjusted their tactics quickly. Drones dove toward the gun, unleashing arcs of plasma. One blast struck the barricade, showering sparks over Ward's shoulder. He didn't flinch. The gun pivoted, catching the drones mid-dive, tearing them apart before they hit the ground. For a moment, the sky itself seemed to burn. Mara's voice crackled through the headset, strained. "We're holding. They're regrouping, but they're falling back." Ward didn't let go of the trigger. "Don't celebrate yet." Through the drifting smoke, the alien rear guard stepped forward, taller, broader units with heavier plating. Their armor pulsed with red light. These were not infantry. They were enforcers, the Zerath's answer to failure. They carried twin plasma lances, their energy fields humming like wasps. Ward's men hesitated. One whispered prayer. Another cursed. Ward planted his boots, adjusted the angle, and aimed. Let's see how thick you bleed. The first enforcer's shield flared bright under the barrage. The gun chewed through it in seconds. When the second fell, the others turned, suddenly uncertain. They began to retreat. Not in formation this time, but scattered, panicked, stumbling through their dead. Cease fire, Ward ordered. The silence that followed was deafening. Steam rose from a gun. His ears rang with the memory of noise. The battlefield lay still again. The snow was carved with smoking trenches, the remains of alien metal half buried like bones. Ward stepped forward, scanning the horizon. No movement, no sign of pursuit. The second wave had failed. Mara joined him, her face streaked with soot. That's twice now, she said. They'll come harder next time. He nodded slowly. They're learning. Then we have to learn faster. Ward looked at her, then at the gun, then at the horizon where faint blue lights flickered in the distance. Ships withdrawing, not retreating. Testing, measuring. They'll bring everything they've got, he said, and we'll give them everything we have left. Hessa limped over, clutching his bandaged arm. Sir, we can't keep this up. Ammo's low, power cells are nearly dead, and we've lost half our men. Ward met his eyes. I know. So what do we do? He looked at the Gatling gun, its barrel scarred and glowing faintly in the dark. The wind whispered across the field, carrying the echo of the last shots into the endless cold. We hold, he said quietly, until there's no one left to hold. Mara watched him for a long moment. There was something different in her expression, not despair, but respect, almost awe. She holstered her rifle and turned back to the others. You heard the man. Fortify what's left. We make them earn every inch. As she walked away, Ward placed a hand on the weapon's frame. The cold bit through his glove. Somewhere beyond the stars, an alien commander was planning their next move. He could almost hear the voice again, mocking, analytical, certain of victory. He smiled faintly. Come and learn, you bastards, he whispered. The sky flickered with distant flashes, ships regrouping, readying for another strike. Ward stood alone in the snow beside his gun, the last warmth of battle fading from the air. The universe above seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the farthest ridge, a new light began to rise. And he knew the war for Karsk. 9 had only just begun. The snow had stopped falling by morning, leaving a white silence that pressed against the ears like a weight. The battlefield stretched beyond the outpost in a frozen sprawl of metal wreckage and blackened craters. The bodies of Zerath's soldiers glittered faintly under the pale sun, their once perfect armor cracked and dull. Sergeant Elias Ward stood among them, the wind tugging at the edges of his coat. The Gatling gun loomed behind him, a monument of iron and defiance. 2 battles won, and yet victory felt like standing on the edge of a blade. He knelt beside a broken Zerath unit, its chest plate split open. The interior was a lattice of wires and pale, organic tissue, a fusion of machine and life. The faceplate twitched, its dying optics flickering. Primitive weapon, it rasped in a voice like crushed glass. Unacceptable anomaly. Ward stared at it for a moment before crushing the speaker under his boot. Get used to disappointment. Mara approached, her breath misting in the cold air. Scouts report movement near the northern ridge, she said. Small units, maybe drones. Looks like they're collecting their dead. Ward rose slowly. They're not burying them. They're learning from them. She frowned. So are we. He glanced toward the gun, its barrels blackened and worn from overuse. We're learning the same lesson humanity always learns, he said. Nothing makes us adapt faster than being told we can't win. Inside the outpost, the surviving crew moved through the cramped corridors with quiet purpose. Tools clanged, wires sparked, and the smell of burnt circuitry hung in the air. The makeshift engineers had scavenged components from downed alien drones, splicing Zerath power cells into human machines. The Gatling gun now sat wired to a pulsing blue core, an energy source the aliens had once used to charge their plasma rifles. Hessa stood beside it, arms still in a sling, eyes wide as the weapon hummed with a faint new light. "She's alive," he said with a grin. Ward stepped closer, feeling the vibration through the floor. "Careful. We don't know how stable that core is." Mara smirked faintly. "Neither do they." Ward couldn't help the ghost of a smile. "Then we'll call it even." For a few hours, there was something close to peace. The men ate, repaired, and rested. But peace on Karsk. 9 was like sunlight in winter, it never lasted. The sky began to shimmer with faint auroras, thin ribbons of green and gold that rippled across the horizon. Ward stepped outside, eyes narrowing. "That's not natural." Mara joined him, scanning the shifting light. "It's atmospheric interference," she said. "High-orbit activity. They're preparing something big." He said nothing for a moment, then turned toward the communication dish, a skeletal structure crusted with frost. "Any chance we can get that transmitter back online?" She hesitated. "Maybe, if we reroute power from the gun." Ward shook his head. "Not an option." "Then what's the plan?" He looked at her with a tired, grim calm. "We dig in deeper. If the sky's about to fall, we make sure it breaks on us first." As night descended, the auroras grew brighter, swirling faster. The air thrummed with a low hum that set everyone's teeth on edge. The Zerath fleet was realigning in orbit. Ward watched the sky through a cracked pair of binoculars. High above, faint points of light moved with purpose, dozens of them. "They're coordinating," he murmured. "They're not sending soldiers this time." Mara's hand tightened on the railing beside him. "Then what?" "Orbital bombardment," he said. "They're done playing." The realization settled over the outpost like frost. There was no panic, only grim acceptance. The soldiers went about their work with mechanical focus, checking munitions, fortifying barriers, saying their quiet goodbyes. Hessa stood near the gun, adjusting the ammo feed. His usual chatter was gone, replaced by silence. When Ward approached, he didn't look up. "I used to think dying in the snow would be quiet," Hessa said softly. "Turns out it's just cold." Ward rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's make enough noise to keep warm." The auroras began to pulse faster. The sky looked alive, veins of light spreading like cracks through glass. The ground trembled. A voice broke through the static on every frequency, smooth and cold. "Human anomaly designated Karsk 9. Resistance has exceeded acceptable thresholds. Termination protocol authorized by Overseer Kalor." Mara stiffened. "So that's their leader." Ward's jaw tightened. "Then he's the one who needs a lesson." The first orbital strike hit the ridge with a blinding flash. The shockwave hurled snow and debris into the air, the sound tearing through the valley like a scream. The second blast followed, closer this time, the ground buckling under the force. The outpost shook violently, lights flickering, walls groaning. "Power cells holding," someone shouted. Ward braced himself beside the Gatling gun as chunks of ice fell from the ceiling. "Hold the line. When they land, we give them hell." Through the smoke and chaos, alien dropships began to descend again. Larger than before, armored like fortresses. They hit the ground with bone-rattling force, hatches opening to release fresh waves of Zerath troops. These were heavier units, their armor thicker, their movements slower but deliberate. They advanced through the blizzard like a tide of metal giants. Mara took up position beside Ward, her rifle steady. "How many do you think?" "Enough to bury us," he said. "Then they'll need a big shovel." He grinned faintly, and then the battle began. The Gatling gun thundered once more, its new energy core glowing bright blue as the barrels spun faster than before. The slugs tore through the snow, the air filled with fire and steel. The first line of Zerath soldiers fell, their shields collapsing under the combined force of kinetic and energy discharge. The new hybrid system burned through ammunition faster, but it hit like a god's hammer. Ward's world became a blur of noise and motion. The gun kicked against his chest with each burst, every round cutting through the storm like lightning. Mara called out targets, voice hoarse but steady. "Left flank, 4 incoming, 2 more on the ridge." He adjusted the aim, cutting them down in sprays of molten metal. The alien offensive wavered. Their advance faltered. Even as the orbital bombardment continued to pound the distant ridges, the humans held their ground. But the cost was brutal. The East Trench collapsed under a blast, taking 3 soldiers with it. Another went down near the generator. The power core flickered, dimmed, then flared back to life. Ward shouted orders, barely hearing himself over the roar. "Hold the feed steady. Keep her hot." Mara slammed a fresh belt into the gun, her glove scorched. "They're breaking," she yelled. Ward didn't look up. "Then don't let them stop." For a few precious minutes, the field belonged to them again. The aliens began to fall back, leaving behind wrecked armor and silence. Ward's hands ached from the vibration, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He could taste metal in the air. As the last Zerath unit disappeared into the storm, the bombardment ceased. The auroras dimmed. The world fell quiet except for the hum of the cooling gun. Mara sank to her knees beside him, exhausted. "They'll come again," she said. Ward nodded slowly. "They will, but not tonight." He looked toward the horizon where the alien ships hovered faintly, their lights pulsing like distant stars. Somewhere up there, Overseer Collor was watching. Ward raised his hand and rested it against the gun's frame. "We just taught them fear," he said quietly. "They'll spend the night trying to understand it." The cold wind swept through the ruins of the outpost, carrying away the smoke, the echoes, the smell of battle. Above them, the auroras flickered once more, as if the planet itself were catching its breath. Ward stood unmoving, eyes on the sky. The war wasn't over. It was only waking up. Dawn arrived as a dim blue glow that barely touched the snow. The storm had passed, leaving the world stripped bare and still. What remained of Outpost Karsk? 9 stood half-buried under drifts of ice, its walls cracked and smoking. The antenna mast leaned at an awkward angle, and the communication dish lay shattered beside it like the bones of a fallen giant. Yet amid the ruin, the Gatling gun still stood, blackened, scarred, but upright. Sergeant Elias Ward stood beside it, his breath slow and steady, the cold air stinging his lungs. Around him, the survivors moved like shadows, silent and gaunt, their faces hardened by exhaustion. They had held through the night, and somehow, impossibly, they were still alive. Mara approached from the command bunker, a tablet clutched in her gloved hand. "The last of the drones are offline," she said, "but they've stopped pulling back. I think they're regrouping." Ward didn't look up. "They'll hit us again." "Not immediately," she replied. "They're recalibrating after the last failure. They'll need time to—" The sky above them pulsed suddenly with blue light. The auroras flared to life again, brighter than before, streaking the heavens with color. Then the voice came, smooth and unhurried, echoing across every open channel. "Human Command Entity Elias Ward. You have demonstrated defiance inconsistent with your technological status. This anomaly requires direct correction." Ward exhaled through his nose, a humorless smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Guess I'm famous." Mara frowned. "That's not a transmission. It's projection." He's broadcasting directly. The air in front of them shimmered. A figure took shape within the light, tall, sleek, metallic, its surface reflecting the frozen ground. The holographic form of Overseer Collor regarded them with alien stillness. "Surrender this facility," it said. "You have delayed the inevitable through primitive means. Continued resistance will result in total annihilation." Ward rested his hand on the Gatling gun's frame. "You've been saying that since you got here," he said. "But you keep bleeding." "Bleeding is a biological concept," the Overseer replied, tilting its head. "We do not bleed. We correct errors." "Then you're about to correct a lot of them." Collor's image flickered. "You have adapted beyond your parameters. That cannot continue." The projection vanished, and the auroras dimmed once more. Mara turned to Ward. "He's coming." "Personally." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Good." The soldiers went to work without orders. Ammunition belts were checked, barricades patched, and the last of the energy cells wired into the gun's base. Hessa limped up beside Ward, a grim smile cracking his frostbitten lips. If he's bringing the whole army, I want front row seats. You'll get them, Ward said. Just don't stand when the music starts. By midday, the sky had turned a deep iron gray. The temperature dropped sharply, and the stillness broke. The sound came first, low, distant, like thunder rolling through a canyon. Then the lights appeared on the horizon, a vast fleet descending, ship after ship burning through the clouds. They formed a formation too precise to be natural, each one a black spear cutting through the atmosphere. Mara watched from the tower, her face pale. That's not an assault force, she said quietly. That's extermination. Ward adjusted the targeting scope on the Gatling gun. Then we make them remember who we are before they erase us. The first plasma strikes hit the outer ridges, sending waves of fire rolling across the snow. The explosions threw up clouds of ash and vapor that turned the sky into a storm of gray fire. The outpost trembled. Metal screamed. A second barrage followed, closer this time, hammering the trenches. Still, the humans held their ground. The gun's new core pulsed bright blue, its energy humming like a heartbeat. Targets inbound, Mara shouted. Ward swung the barrels toward the advancing line. The Zerath army filled the valley, a sea of gleaming bodies, thousands strong, moving with mechanical precision. At their center marched a towering figure of black alloy and living circuitry, Overseer Kalor, encased in armor that pulsed with crimson light. The alien's voice echoed through the air again, louder now, vibrating in Ward's chest. In a defiance. Begin correction. Ward didn't answer. He pulled the trigger. The Gatling gun came alive with a roar that shook the ground. The blue glow from its core flared brighter, its barrels spinning faster than ever before. Bullets screamed through the air, ripping into the alien ranks. The impact tore through their lines, kinetic force slamming against energy fields until they shattered like glass. The gun song filled the world again, a mechanical fury that drowned out everything else. Kalor raised a hand, generating a massive energy shield. Plasma bursts erupted from the alien lines, scorching the snow around the outpost. The gun crew ducked, shouting through the chaos. Hessa reloaded frantically, his hands trembling. We're burning through the belts too fast. Keep feeding her, Ward shouted. She'll stop when we do. Mara fired from her perch, cutting down drones that swarmed toward the tower. The air shimmered with heat and static. Every shot was a heartbeat. Every burst was defiance made flesh. The Gatling gun's barrels glowed white-hot. Sparks flew from its frame. The hybrid core overloaded, light spilling from its seams. Ward could feel the vibration through his boots, through his bones, as if the weapon were alive, straining against its limits. Kalor advanced through the storm of bullets, his armor cracking but not breaking. Your resistance is irrelevant, he said. You are already obsolete. Ward's voice was steady, though the heat scorched his skin. Maybe, he said, but you're still standing in front of me. The gun screamed one last time. The barrels spun faster than they were ever meant to, metal warping from the force. The final volley hit Kalor square in the chest. The Overseer's shield flared, fractured, and then shattered with a sound like thunder. The alien's body convulsed as the rounds tore through, throwing sparks and fluid into the air. Kalor staggered, his glowing eyes dimming. Impossible, he whispered before collapsing into the snow. For a moment, everything stopped. The alien army froze mid-advance. Then, as if a signal had been cut, they broke ranks. Machines turned aimlessly. Others fell motionless, their synchronization gone. The valley fell into silence, broken only by the hiss of steam rising from the gun. Ward stepped back, chest heaving. The Gatling gun's barrels sagged, warped beyond repair, smoke curling into the cold air. Hessa let out a breath that turned into a laugh, wild and disbelieving. We did it, he said. We actually did it. Mara joined Ward's side, lowering her rifle. Kalor's gone. Their command net just collapsed. They're retreating. Ward watched the sky. The remaining ships were pulling away, their lights vanishing into the clouds. He said nothing for a long time. Then, softly, they'll be back. Not soon, she said. No, he agreed. But someday. They always come back. The cold wind rose again, sweeping through the valley, carrying away the smoke and ash. Around them, the surviving soldiers began to cheer, a sound raw and uncertain but alive. Ward didn't join them. He reached out, resting his hand on the gun's ruined frame. "You did good, old girl," he murmured. Mara looked at him. "You think they'll talk about this?" He nodded. "They'll have to. Every empire needs a story about the day it learned fear." She smiled faintly. "And what about us?" Ward turned toward the horizon, where the first weak light of morning cut through the clouds. "We'll rebuild," he said, "or we won't. Either way, they'll remember." The wind carried his words away into the endless white. Above, the auroras faded, leaving the sky empty and cold. The gun stood silent now, its work done, a relic of iron and will against the impossible. Ward remained beside it, unmoving, as the sun broke over the ridge and touched the field of frozen metal with light. Somewhere beyond the stars, a broken fleet fled into the dark. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy remembered what it meant to fear a human weapon.